So someone was actually asking me earlier about exercise and how many calories they burn during an exercise. I'm not sure if I put this chart in your packet, but it's a very simple one. I'll draw it quick. Basically it looks like this. This is time, and this is your metabolism. So this is the beginning of your metabolism before exercise, okay? And this is actually days. So day 1, day 2, day 3, we'll say. So when you're doing high intensity exercises, it actually keeps your metabolism boosted for more than just while you're doing the exercise, more than just that day. So that's why it is important to, do the exercise. It's not just boosting your metabolism for that day, it's doing it for several days after. Exercise is used for a number of reasons. With each passing decade after the age of 25, we lose about 5 pounds of lean muscle mass each decade. Okay? So the way you combat that is with resistance training. The other thing is we lose about 2 to 4% of our metabolic rate each decade after 25. But remember, I did say if you keep the lifestyle that you had when you're 25 being very active, you can combat that as well and get a much more limited decrease in that. Okay? All right. Time to talk about macronutrients. So there's 3 major macronutrients in the body. Anyone know what they are? That's it. Protein, fat, and carbs. Awesome. So fat isn't this evil thing that a lot of people think it is. It's got a lot of benefits to it. But we're going to start with carbs first. Okay? Carbs, which the body converts into glucose, is the main energy source for the body. Okay? The body prefers about 20 grams of glucose to be circulating through the body at one time. So now if there's excess, what does the body do? The body likes to maintain what's called homeostasis. So what that means is just balance. It wants to get back to that level. So it has systems to help it do that, to get back to that level. So this extra glucose can be taken up. Can be taken up by liver or the muscles. Of course, they also have limits. The liver can take up about 80 to 100 grams of glucose, and muscle can take up to 300 to 600 grams of glucose till they are filled. Once they're filled, what do you think happens to that excess glucose? Fat. So that's where you run into the problem. Getting too much where your liver and your muscles are overloaded at that point, the body can't handle anymore. So it becomes fat in the body. The other great thing about exercise is that it enhances the muscle's ability to absorb glucose. You want that glucose to be absorbed by your muscles. If it gets absorbed by your muscles, the only place that glucose can be used is in your muscles. It gets converted into something called glycogen. Okay, the terms aren't that important for your guys' understanding. But when it's absorbed by the muscle, next time you have to go do something physical, that muscle has that excess energy. If the the carbohydrate or the glucose is absorbed somewhere else in the body, you don't know where it's going to end up. It could become fat. It could be transported and used in different processes, like by the kidneys or by the brain, because the brain also uses this glucose to help you think. So if you have a day when you haven't eaten a lot and you're like, man, I keep screwing up these numbers or at work, that's why. Have you guys heard anything about the glycemic index? Okay, so GI, glycemic index. Okay, there might be a visual in there too, but I'll give you a quick one here. Okay, so there's high GI foods and low GI foods. High GI foods, bagels, candy, breads, things with a lot, white potatoes, white breads. And then you have your low glycemic foods, or things like vegetables, high fiber grains, legumes, beans. Okay, these things don't spike the glucose in your blood as much, which is much better. So the high glycemic food, spikes it more. The low glycemic spikes it less and for a less duration. So you're not going to have that excess glucose in the blood circulating to get converted into fat, because the smaller amount the body will be able to absorb, it'll be used for energy, and you'll be able to move on with your day. We talked about how the muscles are more sensitive to absorbing glucose after exercise, right? This also could be known as insulin sensitivity. You guys may have heard of insulin, something, you know, someone with diabetes usually has to deal with. But it's the same kind of concept. The body responds to the insulin better right after exercise. So we're going to talk about a little bit later how if you choose your timing to eat these carbohydrates, you can actually get away with eating a lot of these carby high foods that you guys do enjoy, and you can still do them, but it's just when you do them that actually can make a big difference. So the minimum carbs we need is 50 grams per day, but they suggest we get 130 grams. For most people, they're getting far above 130 grams of carbs. Okay, so that's just an idea to keep in mind. The minimum we need is 50, but they suggest to get 130. 50 is what we need just for our brains to function, just for our kidneys, all the organs to function properly without any problems. All right. Type of carb is fiber. You guys probably have heard that. The big thing with fiber is that it helps digestive health. It helps your colon. It also makes you feel full after you eat, which is a good thing. So you don't feel like you're starving and you don't go reach for those other sugary snacks. Next we're going to talk about our fats. Okay, so fats, you know, a lot of times people think, oh, they make me fat. There's a lot of good stuff that fats do also, though. They, you know, besides providing energy similar to glucose, because they can, the body will actually change into using fats as an energy source if you start using more fats in your diet instead of glucose, instead of carbohydrates or glucose for that matter. The body has a system to adjust. So it has the fat, it's going to utilize it if you don't give it excess glucose like most of us in American society do. But it also helps balance the hormones out. So like I said, one of the other things is sometimes imbalanced hormones will screw up our metabolic rate, our resting metabolic rate. So fats will help that hormone balance. And it'll also help transport cholesterol out of the body, which is important. So I'm going to break down the different types of fats. You guys probably have heard some of these. Saturated, poly, and mono unsaturated. Okay, so there's the three main types of fats in the body. Anyone know which one's the most important? Or want to guess?
I would say it's the unsaturated and poly.
Okay, any other guesses? I'm not saying if it's right or wrong. The answers are probably in your packet. Hint, hint. Saturated. Okay. All right, we actually need all three. And we actually need all three in an equal amount. So we actually need 1/3 from this, 1/3 from this, 1/3 from this to be able to function properly, which most people are like, what? No way. Yeah, we actually need a balance of all three. Saturated fats, this is usually your animal fats. That's where that comes from, okay? And then your mono, you got things like olive oil, your nuts, different kinds, almonds, pecans, okay? And then our, actually, that's actually backwards. So let's make this mono. Just looking at it from the other side. Okay, so you got your olive oil, nuts, almonds. That's all your mono unsaturated fats. And then your polyunsaturated are things you probably have heard of, like flax seeds. Okay, you want to grind those up. Things like fish oils, hemp. Okay, name a couple. I think you guys probably have this chart in the, this is one of the ones that was really small, but if you go in the back, you'll have it blown up. Okay. The other thing that falls under polyunsaturated fat is omega-3, omega-6. I think by now most people have heard of these. You guys familiar with the terms omega-6, omega-3? Okay, so those fall under polyunsaturated fat. Okay, so I'm going to put that in here. The interesting thing about these two is you actually need these in an even ratio also. So after you divide these by 1/3, out of this 1/3 that's coming from polyunsaturated, half should come from omega-6 and half should come from omega-3. So if anyone right now is thinking this is way too much math, this is really confusing, right? Don't worry, it's going to get easier. I'm just trying to teach you guys the science so you don't think it's completely coming out of left field later. Okay, and there's one type of fat that you guys probably have heard of. Dunkin' Donuts is famous for it, that you want to avoid at all costs. Any idea what it is? Trans fat. Yep, trans. So none of that. That's the one we don't need. Doesn't really benefit us. It's linked to things like Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, lymphoma, all kinds of cancers. So it really doesn't do anything positive for us like these do, improving hormone health or anything like that. Last one we're going to do is the proteins, which is also known as amino acids. Okay, these are primarily digested in the liver. The body likes to keep about 100 grams of these circulating in the blood at one time. But unlike glucose, the body doesn't really store these amino acids. They either use them or kind of excrete them. So that's why it's important to constantly be getting protein in your diet. And that's actually one of the things that most Americans have not enough of, not enough protein. We usually overeat on the carbs and don't get enough protein, because protein is not something we store. It's in the blood for a little bit. It's a blood pool that circulates, but it gets depleted. So there's some minimum requirements. They're higher than usually people realize, but for a sedentary person, you want 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. That says 0.8 for those that, okay. For someone that's active, they want 1.4 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Most people probably get closer to half of this. And if someone's following what a lot of people may be familiar with, a low carb diet, those are pretty popular these days, and for good reason, then you're going to want anything greater than 0.8 per kilogram of body weight. Okay, again, these aren't things, unless you're really advanced, that you're going to sit there and measure out every day, but it's just some numbers to keep in mind and realize that we generally undereat.
How do you know how much, like a piece of chicken, how much protein is in that?
We're actually going to get into a very easy way in a second, so hold that thought. But it's going to be even easier than knowing, how much is a chicken versus steak versus something else. Okay?
How much fat should we take in per day?
How much fat? We're going to get into all that, I promise. This is just the basic stuff. Although it doesn't seem basic. Okay, cool. Any questions about proteins? So we talked about macronutrients. Now we got the micronutrients. Okay, any idea what these would consist of? There you go. You got it right in front of you. Some vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. Okay, again, it'd be pretty crazy to try to measure all these things out, but these are things that you're getting in your diet. Vitamins, there's two major categories: fat soluble, water soluble. Not that big for you guys to memorize, but you have A, D, E, K. Vitamins A, D, E, and K are fat soluble. That means they're dissolved in fat. And the water soluble ones are B and C. Minerals, you also have two categories of that: macro and micro. I know it keeps breaking down smaller and smaller. Okay, and for the macro ones, you want greater than 100 milligrams per day. And then these are less than 15 milligrams per day. As my writing gets sloppier and sloppier. Again, you're not going to measure all this stuff out. Don't freak out. I'm just trying to give you an idea how these things break out so they make sense. Then the phytochemicals are things that fight infections, fight disease, fight free radicals, help you not get sick. A lot of vegetables have these. They protect your DNA of your cells. They also protect your cell wall. So some examples of these are, I think I listed some for you. Yams, they're an antioxidant. You got flax or soy, improves estrogen levels, so it improves your hormones. Cruciferous vegetables improve your estrogen levels as well. You have pepper, can protect your DNA, and I think a lot of people know that garlic's good for you. You've probably heard of that. That is an antibacterial. Okay, so these are just kind of some hidden features of foods that, you know, as long as you're eating the way we're going to talk about in a second, you're not going to have to worry about breaking them down this specifically. All right, I put a few pictures in there for you. We're not going to go through them. They're just for you to view. If you have any deficiencies in these parts of your body, you can look for these, and you may be deficient in one of these vitamins. So this is just something to go through on your own, see if you're deficient in these areas. There's also one called Who's at Risk. So if you have something like Crohn's disease or alcoholism, or if you're pregnant, things that you're more likely to be deficient in. You know, vegan and vegetarian diets tend to be a little more deficient, for example, in B12 and zinc. Okay?
This on top says, who's at risk if you have, you may be deficient in?
Right, exactly. Yeah. It might not come out well. If you have on the left category, and you may be at risk for a deficiency in the right-hand side. And then the third one has to do with medications. If you're taking some medications, can also make you deficient for certain vitamins. Okay? So that's just a little thing that you guys can look at on your own time. That'll be specific for you. Okay, for those people that exercise with me, they know I'm big on this. I always make them stop to go get it. Water. We need water. Most of us don't drink enough. So very similar to how we talked about calorie balance, you also need balance with your water. This is fluid in. You want to equal fluid out. Okay? It's important to balance it out. 60% of your body, there's some numbers that say more than that, are consisting of water. Fruits and vegetables do have more water in them, so naturally if you start to eat more of them, you'll actually be more hydrated. Another benefit of eating more fruits and vegetables. Depending on your climate, your type of activity, all these things will influence how much water you need. But the general recommendations are that we need 3 liters per day, okay, of water. Now, we usually get about 1 liter from the food we eat, depending on the diet, okay, of water. Now, we usually get about 1 liter from the food we eat, depending on the diet. If we don't eat any fruits and vegetables, that might be a little bit less. But generally, we get 1 liter from food. Okay, that leaves 2 liters that we need to get from actually drinking. It's 500 milliliters is 1 water bottle. So 1 liter is the equivalent of 2 Poland Spring water bottles like this. Okay? So basically, six water bottles.
Pretty much a gallon of water a day.
Yeah.
Ground up.
Now, let's say you exercise. Okay? For every half hour of exercise, that equals 500 milliliters of water. Makes sense, right? When you exercise, you sweat. So
You lose 500.
approximately. Again, depends the type of exercise. There's a million factors that can go into it. But if you're working out for an hour, then you should drink 2 water bottles. Do you want to wait till you're thirsty? No, we know at that point, right, you're already dehydrated. And it's also, you can only drink so much at once and not, feel sick to your stomach. So you want to start drinking this water beforehand, okay, before you actually exercise. So if you're exercising for an hour, then you need to bump it up 1 full liter. Half hour, 500 milliliters. Okay, so let's say you have an average day that you're exercising. You're not eating the greatest diet. That's where we get that you need 8 water bottles a day, which is a lot of water. Now, if you start eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, that number would be more like 6. Yeah, I mean, you know things that like quench your thirst even though you're eating them, right? Like watermelon. It's a great example. It's a great example. So believe it or not, things get pretty crazy as soon as we start getting dehydrated. So I'm just going to put a couple here at 0.5% dehydration. So the start is 100%. You're 100% hydrated. All right, this is when you already got strain on your heart. That's nothing. I mean, I'm probably more than that right now just talking all this time. Okay, 1% dehydration, you reduce your aerobic capacity. At 3%, muscle strength gets reduced. 5% heat exhaustion. 6% heat stroke or a coma. Nice things, right? And then 10 to 20% death. So I know when I saw this was kind of shocking to me, realizing, that water can have that great effect on us at that little amount. But when we do have as much in our body and it's as influential as it is, it does happen